Come with me to get something to eat.
Struggling singing mom meets dad with 4 kids pleading for food. What happened next stunned him. She thought she was just singing for spare change, until a man with 4 kids approached her, begging for food. What happened next left everyone watching in tears. Before we go into details, click subscribe, like and comment where you're watching from. I would be glad to know this story goes as far as Canada, all of the United States of America, Australia, Africa, and even the United Kingdom. So let me know where you're watching from on comment section. I pray may the good God Almighty bless and preserve you all and your family. Amen. Let's begin. The fluorescent lights of Save Mart grocery store flickered with their usual mechanical indifference as Marcus Chen pushed his overloaded shopping cart down aisle 7. It was 9:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, and the store would close in 13 minutes. He moved with the practiced efficiency of a man who had learned to navigate life's mundane tasks while carrying an invisible mountain on his shoulders. His 4 children trailed behind him like ducklings. Emma, his oldest at 12, held 6-year-old Sophie's hand while 9-year-old twins Jake and Lily debated in heated whispers about which cereal contained more marshmallows. Marcus barely registered their voices anymore. They had become background music to his exhaustion, a soundtrack he loved dearly but couldn't fully appreciate through the fog of his perpetual weariness. "Dad, can we get the one with the astronaut on it?" Jake tugged at Marcus's worn jacket. "We'll see, buddy." It was Marcus's default response lately. "We'll see. Maybe. Not right now." All phrases that really meant, "I'm doing my best, but I'm drowning here." 3 years. It had been 3 years since Rebecca left. Not died. That would have been easier to explain to the kids, to himself, to the judgmental eyes at parent-teacher conferences. She had simply decided one morning that motherhood wasn't her calling, that the white picket fence dream had become a prison, and that she needed to find herself in a way that apparently required abandoning 4 children and a husband who had built his entire world around her smile. Marcus didn't blame her anymore. Blame required energy he no longer possessed. As he rounded the corner toward the checkout lanes, something stopped him. Not a physical obstacle, but a sound. A voice so hauntingly beautiful it seemed to exist outside the normal spectrum of human experience. It was singing, and it was coming from the small alcove near the store's entrance where they kept the seasonal displays and lottery ticket machine. The voice carried notes that seemed to bend reality itself, weaving through the air like golden threads of pure emotion. Marcus found his feet moving toward it before his brain registered the decision. Behind him, his children fell silent, equally entranced. There, partially hidden behind a cardboard cutout of a grinning jack-o'-lantern, sat a woman who looked like she was made of shadows and moonlight. Her clothes hung on her thin frame, a faded denim jacket over a once-white shirt, jeans with worn knees, and sneakers that had long ago forgotten their original color. Her dark hair fell in tangled waves around her face, but when she lifted her eyes to hit a particularly high note, Marcus saw something that made his breath catch. Her eyes held entire universes of pain, hope, desperation, and defiance all at once. They were the eyes of someone who had walked through fire and emerged clutching beauty in charred hands. She was singing Hallelujah, but not the version everyone knew. This was something else, arrangement so personal, so raw, it felt like witnessing someone's soul laid bare on a surgical table. Her voice cracked on certain words, not from lack of skill but from an excess of feeling. She sang like someone who needed to sing the way others needed to breathe. At her feet sat an upturned baseball cap with perhaps $3 in crumpled bills and scattered change. Marcus stood frozen, his cart forgotten, his children gathered around him like witnesses to something sacred. When the last note faded into the sterile air of the grocery store, there was a moment of absolute silence, the kind of silence that follows revelation. Then Sophie, his youngest, began to clap. Her small hands created a sound that seemed impossibly loud in the quiet store. Emma joined her, then the twins, and finally Marcus found his own hands coming together, applauding this stranger who had just rearranged something fundamental in his chest. The woman's eyes snapped open fully, as if she'd been somewhere else entirely and was surprised to find herself back in this fluorescent reality. A flush crept up her neck. She started to stand, reaching for the cap with its meager offerings. "Wait," Marcus heard himself say. "Please. That was what you just did. I don't even have words." She looked at him warily, and he recognized that look. It was the look of someone who had learned that kindness often came with strings attached, that compliments were frequently preludes to demands. "Thank you," she said quietly, her speaking voice still carrying traces of the magic that had infused her singing. "I should go. Stores closing." "Do you sing here often?" Emma asked, her 12-year-old voice filled with genuine wonder. Emma, who had barely shown enthusiasm for anything since her mother left, was looking at this stranger like she'd just witnessed a miracle. The woman smiled, but it was a sad smile that didn't reach her eyes. "When they let me. Security usually asks me to leave, but the night manager, Carlos, he's kind. He lets me finish a few songs before closing." "You're really good," Lily said. "Like, better than the people on TV." "You're too kind." The woman bent to pick up her cap, counting the money quickly. Marcus watched her shoulders sag slightly when the count came to less than $4. She carefully folded the bills and zipped them into her jacket pocket, then dropped the coins into the same pocket where they made a soft jingling sound. Marcus made a decision. It was an impulse, which was unusual for him. Since Rebecca left, he'd become a creature of careful calculation, of measured risk, of protecting his small unit against the chaos of the world. But something about this moment felt significant in a way he couldn't articulate. "Are you hungry?" The words came out before he could stop them. The woman's eyes widened. "I'm fine, thank you." "That wasn't what I asked." Marcus softened his tone. "I'm Marcus. These are my kids, Emma, Jake, Lily, and Sophie. We were just about to check out and head home. I always buy too much food because I'm terrible at meal planning, and half of it goes to waste. Would you consider joining us for dinner? Nothing fancy, just food. And maybe you could tell us about your singing." He watched her face cycle through emotions: suspicion, longing, fear, pride, and finally, something that looked like the moment before surrender. "I don't take charity," she said, but her voice wavered. "It's not charity," Emma interjected, surprising everyone, including herself. "It's dinner. There's a difference." The woman looked at Emma for a long moment, and something passed between them, some understanding that existed in a language Marcus didn't speak but recognized as important. "I'm Diane," she said finally. "Diane Morrison. And I haven't eaten since yesterday morning, so yes. Thank you. I'd like that very much." Marcus's house was a 20-minute drive from Save Mart, through neighborhoods that gradually shifted from commercial brightness to residential quiet. Diane sat in the front passenger seat of his 9-year-old Honda Odyssey, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, staring out at the passing streetlights like they were exotic creatures she'd never seen before. In the back, the children were unusually subdued. Marcus caught Emma's eyes in the rearview mirror and saw something he hadn't seen in months, a spark of curiosity, of engagement with the world beyond her phone screen and the walls she'd built around herself. "How long have you been singing?" Sophie asked, breaking the silence with the fearless directness only a 6-year-old could muster. Diane turned slightly in her seat, offering Sophie a genuine smile. "All my life, sweetheart. My mama used to say I sang before I talked. I'd hum lullabies to my dolls, sing to the birds outside our window, make up songs about breakfast cereal." "That's so cool," Lily breathed. "I wish I could sing like you." "I bet you have your own special talents," Diane said. "Singing is just one way of speaking truth. Everyone has their own way." Marcus found himself wanting to know everything. Where was she from? How did someone with a voice like that end up singing in grocery stores for pocket change? Where did she sleep? Was she safe? The questions crowded his mind, but he held them back. Whatever Diane's story was, she would share it if and when she felt comfortable. They pulled into the driveway of a modest 2-story house that Marcus and Rebecca had bought 7 years ago when they still believed in forever. The lawn needed mowing, the paint needed refreshing, and the front porch light had been burned out for 3 weeks, but it was home. It was shelter and warmth and a place where his children felt safe. "Nice house," Diane said softly as they got out of the van. "It's a mess," Marcus apologized, already mentally cataloging the dishes in the sink, the laundry on the couch, the toys scattered across the living room floor. 4 kids and a single dad means housekeeping isn't exactly our strong suit. "A mess means it's lived in," Diane replied. "Means there's life here. That's not something to apologize for." Inside, Marcus set the grocery bags on the kitchen counter and looked at them with sudden uncertainty. He'd invited this woman to dinner, but what was he actually going to make? His repertoire consisted of approximately 5 meals, all of which required more energy than he currently possessed. How about I cook? Diane offered, reading his hesitation. If you don't mind. It's been a while since I've had access to a real kitchen, and I'd love to. Well, it would make me feel less like I'm taking advantage of your kindness. Marcus wanted to protest, to insist that she was their guest, but something in her expression stopped him. This was about dignity, about exchange rather than charity. He understood that. The kitchen is yours, he said. Fair warning though, I have no idea what I bought. I just grabbed things that look healthy or that the kids might actually eat. Diane moved to the counter and began unpacking the bags with careful attention. Marcus watched as she examined each item: fresh vegetables, chicken breast, pasta, canned tomatoes, herbs, butter, garlic. Her hands moved with purpose, sorting and organizing, and he realized she was planning something in her head. Emma, Diane called out, would you be my sous chef? I could use someone to help chop vegetables. Emma, who had been hovering in the doorway looking uncertain, straightened up. Really? Really? Every good cook needs an assistant. Jake, Lily, you two want to set the table? Sophie, sweetie, you could be in charge of making sure everyone has something to drink. Just like that, Diane had transformed his chaotic household into something resembling a functional unit. The children responded to her direction with an eagerness that made Marcus's throat tight. They were hungry for this, for adult attention that wasn't rushed or distracted, for someone who saw them as capable contributors rather than obligations to manage. Marcus found himself relegated to observer status, sitting at the kitchen table watching this stranger work magic in his kitchen. She moved with practiced efficiency, her hands knowing exactly what to do even as she engaged the children in conversation. So, Emma, you're 12? That's the perfect age for learning to cook. What's your favorite food? I don't know. Pizza, I guess. Emma's knife work was hesitant as she tackled a bell pepper. Pizza is art, Diane said seriously. The balance of sauce, cheese, toppings, it's like composing a song. Each ingredient is a note, and they all have to work together. Here, let me show you how to dice that pepper so the pieces are even. Even pieces cook at the same rate, see? Marcus watched Emma's face transform as she focused on the task, receiving gentle corrections and genuine praise in equal measure. When was the last time he'd taught her something? Really taught her, with patience and attention? He couldn't remember. Dad usually makes chicken nuggets, Sophie announced from her position at the refrigerator, pulling out a pitcher of lemonade. Nothing wrong with chicken nuggets, Diane said diplomatically. Your dad is doing his best, and feeding 4 kids is no small feat, but tonight, we are going to make something special together. Chicken piccata with pasta and roasted vegetables. Sound good? The chorus of approval from all 4 children made Marcus feel both grateful and inadequate in equal measure. As Diane cooked, she talked. Not about herself, not yet, but about food, about flavors, about how cooking was like singing because both required you to feel with more than just one sense. She told them about learning to cook from her grandmother, about how food could tell stories, about how the smell of garlic and butter was like a hug in edible form. The twins set the table with unusual care, actually putting the forks on the correct side without being reminded. Sophie poured lemonade into glasses with intense concentration, her tongue poking out between her teeth. And slowly, as the kitchen filled with the aroma of something delicious, Marcus felt something unfamiliar happening in his chest. It took him a moment to identify it. Hope. Not the desperate, grasping hope of someone drowning, but something gentler. A hope that felt like warm light seeping through cracks in a door he'd thought was permanently sealed. 40 minutes later, they sat around the table, all 6 of them, with plates full of food that looked like it belonged in a restaurant. Diane had even found a candle in one of Marcus's junk drawers and lit it, creating an ambience that transformed their everyday dining room into something special. Before we ate, Diane said softly, would it be okay if I said a blessing? It's something my grandmother taught me. No pressure if that's not your thing. Marcus nodded, surprised to find himself wanting this ritual, this moment of pause and intention. Diane closed her eyes, and the children followed suit. Thank you for this food, for these hands that prepared it, for this table and the people gathered around it. Thank you for unexpected kindness, for second chances, and for the reminder that even in our darkest moments, there are still stars shining. Amen. Amen, the children echoed. They ate. The food was extraordinary. Tender chicken with a bright, lemony sauce, perfectly al dente pasta, vegetables that somehow tasted better than Marcus thought vegetables could taste. But more than the food, it was the atmosphere that nourished something deeper. The children talked and laughed. Sophie got sauce on her nose. Jake and Lily debated whether dinosaurs would have liked pasta. Emma asked Diane questions about cooking techniques with genuine interest. And Marcus. Marcus simply absorbed it all. This feeling of normalcy, of family dinner without the undercurrent of his own anxiety and exhaustion. It was like watching a play where he'd been handed a new script, one where he wasn't alone in holding everything together. This is the best dinner ever, Sophie declared, her face serious. Even better than Mom's spaghetti. The table went quiet. Sophie's eyes widened as she realized what she'd said. Marcus felt the familiar squeeze in his chest, the automatic panic about whether mentioning Rebecca would derail the entire evening. But Diane just smiled. That's about the best compliment a cook can receive. But I bet your mom's spaghetti was pretty special too. Good food made with love is always wonderful. She'd done it so smoothly, acknowledged the comment without making it awkward, validated Sophie without dismissing the past. Emma's shoulders relaxed. The twins resumed eating. Crisis averted. After dinner, as Marcus began clearing plates, Diane stopped him. Let the kids and me handle cleanup. You cooked all those meals before tonight. You've earned a break. I didn't cook this one, he protested weakly. No, but you opened your home to a stranger. You trusted your children with someone you'd met an hour ago. That takes a different kind of courage. Her eyes met his, and Marcus saw that she understood more than she was saying. Go sit. Rest. We've got this. So Marcus found himself on the living room couch, listening to the sounds of his children washing dishes and chatting with Diane about everything and nothing. He heard Emma laugh, actually laugh, at something Diane said about soap bubbles being temporary sculptures. He heard Sophie singing a made-up song about plates and forks. He heard the twins arguing playfully about who was the better rinser. And underneath it all, he heard Diane's voice, warm and encouraging, treating his children like they mattered, like they were worth her time and attention. When the kitchen was clean, cleaner than it had been in months, Diane emerged wiping her hands on a dish towel. The children had scattered to their various activities, Emma to her room to do homework, the twins to their shared bedroom to build something with Legos, Sophie to the living room floor with her coloring books. Diane stood in the doorway looking uncertain again, the confidence she displayed while cooking fading back into something more fragile. I should probably go, she said quietly. You've been more than generous, and I don't want to overstay. Where will you go? The question came from Emma, who had returned downstairs with her math textbook. She stood on the stairway landing, looking down at Diane with an intensity that made Marcus's heart ache. Diane's smile was carefully constructed. I have a place. Don't worry about me, sweetheart. You're lying. Emma's voice wasn't accusatory, just matter-of-fact. Adults always think kids can't tell when they're lying, but we can. You don't have anywhere to go, do you? The silence that followed was heavy with truth. Diane's carefully maintained composure cracked. Her shoulders sagged. I usually sleep in my car, but my car broke down 3 weeks ago, and I couldn't afford to fix it. Since then I've been managing the shelter downtown when there's room, but they're usually full. Sometimes I sleep in the park if the weather's nice. I'm careful. I'm safe. I'm working on getting back on my feet. It's taking longer than I thought. Marcus watched his daughter process this information. Emma was young, but Rebecca's abandonment had forced her to grow up faster than she should have. She understood loss and uncertainty in ways 12-year-olds shouldn't have to. Dad. Emma looked at Marcus with eyes that reminded him painfully of his own mother's, eyes that saw through excuses and demanded action. She can stay here. We have that guest room that nobody uses except to store stuff. She can stay there. Emma, that's not, Marcus started. Why not? Emma descended the stairs, Her math book clutched to her chest like armor. You're always saying we should help people when we can. You make us donate clothes we don't wear and toys we don't play with. You volunteer at the food bank twice a month. Why is this different? Because inviting someone to stay in our home is different from donating old clothes, Marcus said, trying to inject some reason into the conversation even as part of him was already agreeing with Emma. Different how? Because it requires more from us? Because it's uncomfortable. Emma's voice rose. She's alone, Dad. She has nowhere to go. She made us the best dinner we've had in forever. She made us feel like we were special. Don't we owe her something? Diane held up her hands. Emma, honey, your dad is right to be cautious. You don't know me. I could be. You're not dangerous, Emma interrupted. You're just alone. Like we are. We are alone too, you know. Dad tries, but is just one person and is tired all the time. And we are all just going through the motions. But tonight felt different. Tonight felt like maybe things could be better. Marcus looked at his eldest daughter and saw himself reflected in her desperation for change, for hope, for something to be different than the grinding sameness of their grief-filled routine. He looked at Diane, who had tears streaming silently down her face, who stood there exposed and vulnerable and so clearly in need. He looked at Sophie, who had stopped coloring and was watching the adults with wide eyes. He thought about Rebecca, who had left because she felt trapped. He thought about his own loneliness, which he hid from the children but which gnawed at him in the dark hours of the night. He thought about trust and risk and the kind of person he wanted his children to become. The guest room is full of boxes and old furniture, he heard himself say. It would take some work to clear out. But if you're willing to stay, Diane, and if you're willing to accept help, then yes, you can stay. Temporarily, he added, as much for his own sense of caution as anything. Until you get back on your feet. Diane's face crumpled. She covered her mouth with both hands, and her whole body shook with silent sobs. Emma moved to her without hesitation, wrapping thin 12-year-old arms around this woman she'd just met, offering comfort with an instinctive grace that made Marcus's eyes burn. Thank you, Diane whispered when she could speak. Thank you. I promise I won't be a burden. I can help with the kids, with cooking, with cleaning. I can contribute. I just need a chance to catch my breath, to not be so scared all the time. We all need that, Marcus said softly. Maybe we can help each other catch our breath. And so, on an ordinary Tuesday night in October, Marcus Chen's household of 4 became a household of 5. He didn't know it yet, but this decision, this moment of saying yes to an unexpected situation, would change all of their lives in ways none of them could possibly imagine. The first 3 days of Diane's presence in the Chen household were a study in careful navigation. She moved through the house like a ghost, trying to take up as little space as possible, thanking Marcus profusely for every small thing, and clearly waiting for the moment when he would realize his mistake and ask her to leave. Marcus, for his part, wrestled with a complex tangle of emotions. Doubt. Had he made a dangerous decision inviting a stranger into his home? Relief. There was another adult to help shoulder the endless tasks of running a household. Guilt. Was he using Diane's desperation to solve his own problems? And underneath it all, something else he couldn't quite name. A sense of rightness, as if some cosmic tumbler had clicked into place. The children, however, had no such complications. They accepted Diane's presence with the adaptability of youth, especially once they realized she was genuinely interested in them. Emma found in Diane something she'd been missing since Rebecca left, a female presence who listened without trying to fix everything. They fell into a routine of cooking dinner together, Emma chopping vegetables while Diane prepared proteins, their conversations ranging from school drama to the deeper questions Emma was afraid to ask her father. The twins discovered that Diane knew an encyclopedic number of songs from their favorite animated movies and could harmonize with herself in a way that sounded like magic. They would beg her to sing while they built their increasingly elaborate Lego creations, and Diane would oblige, her voice filling the house with beauty that seemed to soften even the harsh edges of their loss. Sophie appointed herself as Diane's personal assistant and shadow. She followed Diane around the house, helping with laundry, learning to fold towels, chattering endlessly about her day at kindergarten. In Diane's patient attention, Sophie found something she desperately needed, someone who had time for her endless questions and observations. On the fourth day, Marcus came home from his job at the architectural firm to find the house transformed. The perpetual clutter had been organized. The dishes were done. The laundry was not only washed but folded and put away. And there was dinner cooking, something that smelled incredible and Italian and like the kind of meal that required planning. He found Diane in the kitchen, stirring a pot of sauce while Sophie sat at the counter doing her homework, or rather, doing her homework while providing a running commentary on her teacher's new shoes, the classroom hamster's suspected pregnancy, and whether clouds could have feelings. "You didn't have to do all this," Marcus said, setting his briefcase down. Diane turned, and he saw something new in her face. The fear had receded slightly, replaced by a tentative comfort. "I wanted to. You're letting me stay here. The least I can do is pull my weight." And honestly, it felt good. Felt purposeful. I've been drifting for so long, having structure again is. She paused, searching for words. "It's grounding." What happened? The question came out before Marcus could stop it. "I mean, you don't have to tell me. But someone with your talent, your obvious capabilities. How did you end up singing in grocery stores?" Diane's hand stilled on the wooden spoon. Sophie looked up from her homework, sensing the shift in atmosphere. "Sophie, sweetie, can you go check if your siblings need help with their homework?" Diane asked gently. Sophie, wise beyond her 6 years, nodded and slipped off the stool, leaving the two adults alone in the kitchen. Diane turned off the burner and moved to the kitchen table, sitting down heavily. Marcus joined her, waiting. He'd learned over the past few days that Diane would share when she was ready, and pushing only made her retreat further. "I was a music teacher," she began, her voice soft, "at Jefferson High School, about 2 hours from here. I taught choir, music theory, ran the after-school program. It was my dream job. I'd worked so hard to get there, years of college, student loans I'm still paying off, countless auditions and applications. And when I got that position, I thought I'd made it, you know? Thought I'd found my place." She twisted her hands together, and Marcus saw they were trembling slightly. "I had a husband. Daniel. We'd been together since college. He was an accountant, stable, practical, everything I wasn't. He balanced me out, or so I thought. We had a nice apartment, plans for the future. We were going to start trying for kids after I got tenure." Marcus's chest tightened. He knew where this was going. All sad stories had similar architecture. 3 years ago, Daniel came home and told me he'd lost his job. Corporate downsizing, nothing personal. I told him it would be okay, that we'd figure it out together. My salary wasn't huge, but it was enough to keep us afloat while he looked for something new. Diane's voice took on a hollow quality. What I didn't know was that he'd been hiding things from me. Gambling debts. Credit cards maxed out. He'd been borrowing money from people who weren't patient about being paid back. Jesus Marcus Briated. It unraveled fast. Our savings, gone, used to pay off debts I didn't know existed. Then the creditors started calling. Then the threats started. People showing up at our apartment, at my school. The principal called me in, said there had been incidents that were making parents uncomfortable. A man had come to the school looking for me, had gotten aggressive with the security guard. The school board decided I was too much of a liability. Her laugh was bitter. 10 years of perfect reviews, and I was out in a week. That's not legal. They can't fire you for. They didn't fire me. They strongly suggested I resign for the safety of the students. And they were right. Those people weren't going to stop. So I resigned. Thought Daniel and I would move somewhere new, start over. But Daniel. She swallowed hard. Daniel took what little money we had left and disappeared. Just vanished one night while I was at a friend's house. Left me with all the debt in both our names, all the angry people looking for payment, and a note saying he was sorry but he couldn't do it anymore. Marcus wanted to reach across the table, to offer comfort, but he sensed Diane needed to finish her story without interruption. I lost the apartment within 2 months. Moved in with friends, but I couldn't find work. Couldn't use the school as a reference. Couldn't explain the gap in employment without the whole story coming out. Burned through my friend's patience and goodwill. Started sleeping in my car. And then the car died, and I didn't have money to fix it, and... She gestured vaguely. Here I am. 2 years of falling, and I still haven't hit bottom. Or maybe this is bottom. I don't know anymore. But your voice, Marcus said. Surely you could have. Could have what? Auditioned for things? With no permanent address? No reliable transportation? No money for headshots or accompanists? The professional music world isn't kind to people who fall through the cracks, Marcus. And every day you're homeless, you lose a little more of yourself. Your confidence erodes. Your hope dies by inches. You start to believe you deserve this, that you're broken, that this is all you'll ever be. Diane's eyes met his, and Marcus saw the full depth of her pain, her shame, her desperate fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, this kindness wouldn't be snatched away. I'm telling you all this because you deserve to know who you've let into your home, she continued. I'm not dangerous, but I am damaged. I'm working on putting myself back together, but some days I don't know if all the pieces are even there anymore. If that changes your mind about me staying, I understand. I really do. Marcus sat back in his chair, processing everything he'd just heard. He thought about Rebecca, about how she'd left because she felt trapped by the very thing, family, that had given his life meaning. He thought about how quickly circumstances could change, how fragile security really was. He thought about dignity and shame and the systems that failed people who needed help most. My wife left us 3 years ago, he said finally. Just walked out one day. Said she couldn't do it anymore. The kids, the routine, being a mother and wife. Said it was killing her slowly and she needed to save herself. She's in California now, living in some artist commune, sending occasional postcards to the kids that are really just salt in the wound. She doesn't send child support. Doesn't call. She just checked out of their lives completely. It was his turn to laugh bitterly. So I understand about people making choices that hurt others, about systems failing, about trying to hold it together when you feel like you're coming apart. And I understand about broken pieces. I'm pretty sure I've lost a few of mine along the way too. They sat in silence, two wounded people recognizing each other's scars. You've been here 4 days, Marcus continued, and my children are happier than they've been in months. Emma actually talks at dinner now instead of just pushing food around her plate. The twins haven't had a single screaming fight. Sophie stopped wetting the bed. Did you notice that? 3 nights in a row, dry. And me. I came home today and didn't immediately feel crushed by everything I needed to do. He leaned forward. I'm not naive. I know this arrangement is temporary. I know you're working toward getting back on your feet, toward independence. But while you're here, you're not a burden. You're not charity. You're a person who needed help and was brave enough to accept it. And maybe we needed you too, even though we didn't know it. Diane's eyes filled with tears. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for seeing me as a person and not just a problem. Thank you for seeing my kids as people worth your time, Marcus replied. Something shifted between them in that moment. An understanding. A foundation being laid for something neither of them could quite name yet. The kitchen timer buzzed, breaking the spell. Diane stood, wiping her eyes, and returned to the stove. Dinner's ready. Should I call the kids? Yeah, Marcus said, his voice rough. Let's eat. That night, after dinner was finished and dishes were done, after the kids were in bed and the house had settled into quiet, Marcus knocked softly on the guest room door. Come in, Diane called. He found her sitting on the edge of the bed, the same bed that had been his mother's before she passed, that had sat unused in this room for 2 years surrounded by boxes and forgotten things. She'd cleared those boxes, organized them neatly in the closet. The room looked lived in now, personal. She'd found an old vase somewhere and put some flowers from the yard in it. There were library books on the nightstand. She must have walked to the library during the day. I wanted to say something, Marcus began, feeling awkward. About employment. I work for an architectural firm downtown, Henderson and Associates. We are always looking for good people for various positions. Nothing glamorous, but stable. Administrative work mostly. I could put in a word, help you get an interview. Diane looked up at him, hope warring with fear on her face. I don't have a resume anymore. No references. No. I'll be your reference, Marcus interrupted. I'll tell them you've been helping me with my kids, which is true. I'll tell them you're reliable, hardworking, and trustworthy, which is also true. The rest we can figure out. Why are you doing this? Diane asked, her voice breaking. Why are you being so kind to me? Marcus thought about this question, about his real motivations, his hopes and fears. Because 3 years ago, when Rebecca left, I was drowning. And person after person asked what they could do to help, and when I couldn't articulate what I needed, because how do you articulate, please make my wife come back or please make this not be happening, they drifted away. People are great in a crisis, but terrible at sustained support. They brought casseroles for 2 weeks and then disappeared back into their own lives. He sat down on the small chair near the window. I learned something during that time. I learned that the most precious thing you can give someone who's struggling isn't stuff or advice. It's presence. It's showing up. It's saying I see you and I'm not running away from your mess. And I learned I wanted my kids to grow up being the kind of people who show up, who help not because it's easy or comfortable, but because it's right. He met her eyes. You needed help. I could help. It's really that simple. Everything else, the fact that you make incredible meals and that my kids adore you and that the house runs smoother with you here, that's all bonus. The core of it is just, you're a person who needed help, and I could provide it. Diane covered her face with her hands and cried, deep, wrenching sobs that spoke of months or years of holding everything together with hope and spit. Marcus let her cry, understanding that sometimes tears were the only appropriate response to unexpected kindness. When she could speak again, she said, I will work so hard. At whatever job you can help me get. I will save every penny. I will rebuild my life. And someday, when I'm stable again, I will pay this forward. I will find someone else who needs help, and I will be for them what you've been for me. I believe you, Marcus said simply. Marcus made the call to his boss on Friday morning. Henderson and Associates was a mid-sized firm that specialized in commercial architecture, shopping centers, office buildings, the occasional civic project. Marcus had been with them for 8 years, starting as a junior draftsman and working his way up to senior architect. He was reliable, talented, and consistently met deadlines. His personal tragedy 3 years ago had earned him a reservoir of goodwill that he'd never fully tapped into. Robert, Marcus said, catching his boss between meetings, I need to ask you something personal. Robert Henderson was in his 60s, a barrel-chested man with silver hair and a reputation for being tough but fair. He'd been the one to pull Marcus aside after Rebecca left and tell him, take whatever time you need. Family comes first. Always. What's going on, Marcus? Everything okay with the kids? The kids are fine. Better than fine, actually. That's sort of what I'm calling about. Marcus took a breath. I've recently had someone come into my life who's been helping with the kids. She's incredibly capable, hardworking, organized. But she's in a difficult situation. She's been homeless, trying to get back on her feet. She's staying with us temporarily, and I'd like to help her find employment. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Marcus could almost hear Robert's mind working through the implications. You're asking me to hire a homeless person with no current references. I'm asking you to interview someone I'm personally vouching for. Someone who's shown in the past week more integrity and work ethic than most people show in a year. She was a high school music teacher, Robert. She's educated, articulate, and desperate for a chance to prove herself. Another pause. What happened to her? Why homeless? Marcus gave the abbreviated version of Diane's story, careful to present facts without melodrama. Robert listened without interrupting. All right, Robert said finally. We do have an opening in administrative support. Receptionist position, some light bookkeeping, organizing files, nothing glamorous, but it's stable and it comes with benefits after 90 days. Have her call Angela in HR, use my name. I'll make sure she gets a fair interview. But Marcus, and I mean this kindly, if she doesn't work out, if there are problems, it falls on you too. You understand that? I understand. Thank you, Robert. Really? You're a good man, Marcus Chen. That little girl who couldn't stop talking about cooking at the last company picnic. That Emma. That's her. She told my wife you were the best dad in the world. You know that. Said you read to her every night even when you're exhausted, that you never miss her school concerts even though you hate crowds, that you still check for monsters under her bed even though she's too old for that. Robert's voice softened. A man raising 4 kids alone, still finding time to help a stranger. That says something about character. I trust your judgment. Have her call Angela. Marcus hung up feeling lighter than he had in years. He found Diane in the laundry room, folding an impossibly large pile of clothes while humming something classical. You have an interview, he announced. Diane nearly dropped the shirt she was holding. What? Monday morning, 9 a.m. Henderson and Associates. Administrative position. It's entry-level, but it's stable, it pays decent, and there are benefits. You need to call their HR manager and set it up, but the interview is basically yours. Diane sat down on the floor amid the laundry, looking stunned. I don't have interview clothes. Or a resume. Or, Emma and I can help you put together a resume this weekend. As for clothes, Emma mentioned you and she are about the same size. She's been growing like a weed. I bet she has things that would work. And if not, we'll figure it out. Marcus, I can't keep taking from you. Then don't think of it as taking. Think of it as borrowing. Someday, when you're stable and successful, you can pass the same clothes on to someone else who needs them. Everything's temporary. Diane. Including need. She looked up at him with such raw gratitude that Marcus had to look away. He wasn't comfortable being seen as anyone's savior. He was just a tired dad trying to do the right thing. That weekend became project interview prep. Emma, who Marcus discovered had inherited his organizational skills, took charge of the resume situation. She sat with Diane at the kitchen table, typing on Marcus's laptop with impressive speed. Okay, so you were at Jefferson High from 2015 to 2022, Emma said, her tongue poking out in concentration as she formatted. And before that? Student teaching at various schools while I finished my master's degree. Before that, undergraduate at State University. What did you teach? Like, what classes? Diane listed her courses, her accomplishments, choirs that won regional competitions, a music theory program she developed that had increased student engagement by 40%, the annual spring musical that had become a community event. As Emma typed, Marcus watched from the doorway. His daughter was engaged in a way he hadn't seen since before Rebecca left. She was focused, purposeful, helping someone in a concrete way that had visible results. We need to list your skills too, Emma said. Not just the teaching stuff. Like, you can cook really well. And you organized our whole house in like 3 days. And you're good with kids, obviously. And your voice. You should mention your vocal performance experience. By Sunday evening, Diane had a 3-page resume that actually looked impressive. Emma had formatted it beautifully, had used action verbs and quantifiable achievements, had made Diane's scattered experience look like a cohesive career trajectory. You did this all yourself. Marcus asked Emma, scrolling through the document. I helped, Emma said, pleased with herself. Mrs. Patterson taught us about resumes in life skills class last semester. I actually paid attention. The clothes situation was solved by a combination of Emma's closet and a quick trip to a thrift store, where Marcus was amazed to find a perfectly serviceable blazer and slacks for under $30. Diane tried on the outfit in the store's tiny dressing room and emerged looking transformed, professional, capable, like someone who belonged in an office rather than on a street corner. I look like a person again, Diane said softly, staring at herself in the mirror. You were always a person, Sophie said matter-of-factly. She'd insisted on coming along and had appointed herself as fashion consultant. Now you just look like a person with a job. Monday morning arrived with the weight of significance. Marcus had taken a personal day to drive Diane to the interview, partly because she needed the transportation, partly because he wanted to be there for moral support. The kids had turned the morning into a pep rally. They'd made her a good luck card covered in glitter and stickers. The twins had practiced interview questions with her over breakfast, asking ridiculous things like, what would you do if a dinosaur attacked the office? Until even Diane's nervous tension cracked into laughter. As they drove downtown, Diane was silent, staring at her hands clasped in her lap. "You're going to be great," Marcus said. "What if I'm not? What if I freeze up or say something stupid or they ask about the gaps in my employment and I—" "Then you tell them the truth. Not all of it, not the parts that aren't their business, but the core truth. You experience some personal setbacks, you're rebuilding, and you're ready to work hard. Angela, the HR manager, she's good people. Fair. She'll give you a real chance." They pulled into the parking garage of the building where Marcus had spent so much of his professional life. He led Diane through the familiar corridors, past the security desk where Jimmy waved and smiled, up the elevator to the 7th floor. The Henderson and Associates office was all glass and clean lines, modern furniture, and motivational posters about teamwork and innovation. The current receptionist, Kathy, was retiring at the end of the month, thus the opening. "You must be Diane," said a woman emerging from one of the interior offices. Angela Martinez was in her 40s, with kind eyes and an expression that suggested she'd seen enough of life to not be easily shocked. "I'm Angela. Thanks for coming in." Marcus squeezed Diane's shoulder once, a gesture of encouragement, then moved to stand by the windows overlooking the city while Angela led Diane back to her office. The interview lasted 45 minutes. Marcus tried not to watch the clock, tried not to manufacture worst-case scenarios in his head. He pulled out his phone and pretended to answer emails, but his attention was on that closed office door. When it finally opened, Marcus couldn't read Diane's expression. She looked shell-shocked, pale, uncertain. Angela walked her back to the reception area, shook her hand warmly. "We'll be in touch by Wednesday," Angela said. "Thank you again for coming in." Marcus and Diane rode the elevator down in silence. They walked through the parking garage in silence. They got in the car, and only when Marcus had pulled out into traffic did Diane finally speak. "I think I did okay," she said slowly. She asked about the employment gap. I told her the truth. About Daniel, about losing everything, about being homeless. I figured she'd find out eventually anyway, and I didn't want to start with a lie. Marcus's hands tightened on the steering wheel. And she was quiet for a long time. Then she said her sister went through something similar, different circumstances, but the same kind of downward spiral when everything fell apart at once. She said she understood how hard it is to climb back up. She asked if I was stable now, if I had reliable housing. I said yes, that I was staying with friends. Diane glanced at Marcus. "I hope that's okay, calling you friends." "It's more than okay." She asked about my skills, about my teaching experience. Wanted to know if I could handle multiple phone lines, manage scheduling, basic bookkeeping. I said I'd managed a budget of over $50,000 for the music department, organized performances with hundreds of students, handled parent communications and administrative reporting. She seemed impressed by that. They stopped at a red light. Marcus turned to look at Diane fully. So she said she had 2 other candidates to interview, but that she'd have an answer by Wednesday. She said. Diane's voice cracked slightly. She said I interviewed well, that she appreciated my honesty, and that anyone Marcus Chen vouched for was worth serious consideration because you're apparently beloved by everyone in that office. Marcus felt his cheeks heat. "I just do my job." She said you once worked for 72 hours straight to finish a project when one of your colleagues had a family emergency and couldn't complete their portion. She said you're the person everyone goes to when they need help, that you never make people feel bad for asking. She said you're the kind of person they trust to know other good people. Diane wiped her eyes. "You're kind of amazing, Marcus Chen. You know that." "I'm really not," Marcus said, uncomfortable with the praise. "I'm just tired and trying my best, like everyone else." "No," Diane said firmly. "You're more than that, and I'm starting to realize it." They drove the rest of the way home, both lost in their own thoughts. Marcus found himself hoping with an intensity that surprised him. He wanted this for Diane, yes, but he also realized he wanted it for his family. Having her in the house had changed something fundamental in their dynamic. The kids were happier, the house ran smoother, and Marcus himself felt less like he was drowning and more like he was treading water with the possibility of reaching shore. Wednesday morning arrived with agonizing slowness. Diane had thrown herself into house projects to distract from her anxiety. She'd reorganized the pantry, cleaned the windows until they sparkled, and was in the middle of alphabetizing the books on the living room shelves when her phone rang. Marcus was at work but had told her to call him immediately with news. The kids were at school. Diane was alone in the house when she answered the phone with a trembling hand. "Hello." "Diane, this is Angela Martinez from Henderson and Associates. Do you have a moment to talk?" "Yes, of course." Marcus's phone buzzed during a meeting with a client. He glanced down at the text from Diane. She called. He excused himself, stepped into the hallway, and called her back immediately. "Well," he said without preamble when she answered. "I got it." Diane's voice was small, disbelieving. "I got the job. I start next Monday. $22 an hour, benefits after 90 days, 2 weeks paid vacation after a year. Marcus, I got it." Marcus leaned against the wall, relief flooding through him so intensely it made him dizzy. "That's amazing. I knew you would." She said I should thank you, that your recommendation carried a lot of weight. "Marcus, I don't know how to." "You don't have to thank me. You earned this yourself. You went in there and impressed her. That was all you." "Still, thank you. For the opportunity, for believing in me when I'd stopped believing in myself. For everything." After they hung up, Marcus stood in that hallway for a long moment, surprised by the intensity of his own emotions. He was happy for Diane, of course, but it was more than that. He felt proud, the way he felt when one of his kids achieved something difficult. He felt invested in her success in a way that went beyond helping a stranger. That evening, they celebrated with ice cream sundaes for dinner, Sophie's suggestion, which the twins had enthusiastically seconded and Emma had supported with the argument that technically ice cream contained dairy and therefore protein. Marcus didn't have the energy to argue, and Diane was too happy to care about nutritional value. They piled the kitchen table with bowls and toppings, chocolate sauce, caramel, sprinkles, crushed cookies, gummy bears, whipped cream. Each person constructed an elaborate dessert while discussing Diane's new job. "Will you have your own desk?" Lily asked. "I will. Right at the front, so I'll be the first person people see when they come in." "Will you wear fancy clothes every day?" Sophie wanted to know. Business casual, Angela called it. "So yes, nicer clothes than I've been wearing around here." "Will you still have time to help me with my math homework?" This from Jake, who had discovered that Diane had a gift for explaining fractions in ways that actually made sense. "Of course. I'll be home by 6 most days. Plenty of time for homework help." Emma was quiet, pushing her ice cream around her bowl. Marcus watched her, recognizing the signs of his daughter working up to saying something difficult. "What happens now?" Emma asked finally, looking at Diane. "I mean, you have a job now. You'll start saving money. Will you leave?" The table went silent. Sophie's spoon stopped halfway to her mouth. The twins froze. Even Marcus found himself holding his breath, waiting for Diane's answer. Diane set down her own spoon carefully. "I don't want to leave," she said slowly. "Being here with you all has been. It's been the best thing that's happened to me in years. But I also don't want to overstay my welcome or take advantage of your father's kindness. So I guess the answer is, I don't know. It depends on what your dad wants and what makes sense for all of us." 4 pairs of eyes turned to Marcus. He felt the weight of this moment, the significance of whatever he said next. "I think," he began carefully, "that we should take it one day at a time. Diane's going to start working, which is amazing. She'll start saving money, which will give her options. But this house, it's big enough for all of us. And having you here, Diane, it's been good for the kids. Good for me too. So I'm not in any hurry for you to leave. If you're comfortable staying, if we can work out a fair arrangement, then stay." "What kind of arrangement?" Diane asked. "You pay rent if and when you're able. You contribute to groceries and household expenses. But more than that, you keep doing what you're doing. Being present for the kids, helping around the house, being part of this strange little family we are cobbling together. Not as an employee or a guest, but as someone who belongs here." Marcus surprised himself with his own words. When had he started thinking of Diane as someone who belonged? When had she transitioned from stranger to friend to something more integral? "I'd like that," Diane said softly. "I'd like that very much." Sophie let out a cheer and immediately got whipped cream in her hair. The twins resumed eating with renewed enthusiasm. Emma smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes, and for the first time in 3 years, Marcus felt like maybe they were going to be okay. More than okay. Maybe they were going to thrive. Diane's first week at Henderson & Associates was overwhelming in the best possible way. She arrived early every day, desperate to prove herself, and stayed late learning the phone system, the filing protocols, the quirks of different architects and their communication preferences. Angela had paired her with Kathy for 2 weeks of training before Kathy's retirement. Kathy was a grandmother in her late 60s who had worked at the firm for 23 years and knew everything about everyone. She took one look at Diane and said, "You're the one Marcus helped." "Yes," Diane admitted, waiting for judgment. "Good for you." "Good for him too. He's been wound too tight for years. Needs to remember there's more to life than work and worry." Kathy showed her how to transfer calls. "Marcus is one of the good ones. You're lucky he found you. Or you found him. However that works." The days fell into a rhythm. Diane would wake at 6, shower, dress in her small collection of professional clothes, and join the family for breakfast. Marcus would make coffee, terrible, burned coffee that no one had the heart to tell him was undrinkable, while Diane made breakfast. Eggs, toast, sometimes pancakes if there was time. The kids would stumble downstairs in various states of wakefulness. Then the morning chaos, finding shoes, locating homework, convincing Sophie that yes, she did have to wear a coat even if she didn't feel cold. Marcus would drop the kids at school, then continue to work. Diane would take the bus, a 40-minute journey that she spent reading library books or reviewing her notes from the previous day. She'd work 9 to 5:30, handling phones and visitors with a professional warmth that quickly made her popular around the office. Architects would stop by her desk to chat, to ask about her weekend, to thank her for handling a difficult client call. She was good at this job. She realized with some surprise that her years of dealing with teenagers and their parents had prepared her perfectly for managing temperamental creative professionals and demanding clients. She'd take the bus home, arriving around 6:15. By then, Marcus would be back with the kids, and the evening routine would begin. Homework at the kitchen table while Diane and often Emma cooked dinner. Marcus would help with math problems or science projects, his architect's precision perfect for geometry and his patient explanations calming even the most frustrated child. Dinner was eaten together, always. This was the rule Marcus and Diane had established without explicitly discussing it. Barring emergencies, they all sat down together for the evening meal. It was during these dinners that Marcus learned about Sophie's complicated social dynamics with a girl named Brittany. That Jake was secretly writing a novel about time-traveling hamsters. That Lily had a crush on a boy in her class but was playing it cool. That Emma was thinking about trying out for the spring musical. "You should," Diane encouraged. "Theater is amazing. It teaches you so much, confidence, teamwork, how to think on your feet. Will you help me prepare for auditions?" Emma asked shyly. "It would be my honor." After dinner came cleanup, then the slower evening hours. Homework completion, baths for the younger kids, the twins' elaborate bedtime routine that involved 3 specific stuffed animals arranged in exact positions. Marcus would read to Sophie. They were currently working through the Chronicles of Narnia, while Diane helped Emma with whatever she needed. Then the house would quiet, the kids in bed, and Marcus and Diane would find themselves in the living room with tea, decompressing from the day. These became Marcus's favorite hours. They would talk about everything and nothing, office politics, kid drama, the news, their pasts, their hopes. "Tell me about your wife," Diane said one evening, about 3 weeks into her employment. "If you want to. You don't have to." Marcus stared into his tea, watching the steam rise. He rarely talked about Rebecca anymore. The wound was old enough now that it had scarred over, but it still ached in certain weather. "She was beautiful," he said finally. "Not just physically, though she was that too. She was beautiful in the way she saw the world, always finding art in ordinary things, always laughing, always moving. She was a dancer when we met. Modern dance, the kind where you express emotions through movement. I saw her perform once and just fell. Completely. What happened? Life happened. We got married, had Emma, then the twins, then Sophie. 4 kids in 6 years. And somewhere in there, Rebecca lost herself. Or maybe she just realized that the self she'd built, wife, mother, suburban life, wasn't the self she wanted to be. She got depressed. Stopped dancing. Started spending hours online looking at her friends' lives. Friends who were traveling, performing, living the artistic life she'd given up. I tried to help. Suggested therapy, date nights, offering to watch the kids so she could take dance classes. But nothing worked. Marcus set down his teacup. One day I came home from work and she was packed. Had 2 suitcases by the door. She said she was suffocating, that she loved the kids but couldn't be their mother anymore, that she needed to leave before she did something worse than leaving. I asked what could be worse than abandoning your children. She said staying and resenting them forever. Did you try to stop her? Of course. I begged, offered to move, to change jobs, to do anything. But she was already gone in her head. Had been for a while, I think. I just hadn't wanted to see it. Marcus rubbed his face. The hardest part wasn't her leaving. It was explaining it to the kids. Emma was 9. Old enough to understand, but young enough to blame herself. The twins were 6 and kept asking when Mommy was coming back. Sophie was 3 and just cried for her mother every night for months. I'm sorry, Diane said softly. Yeah, me too. Marcus looked at her. The weird thing is, I'm not angry anymore. I was at first, so angry I could barely function. But now I just feel sad. Sad for her, that she felt that trapped. Sad for the kids, that they lost their mother. Sad for all of us, that love wasn't enough. Love is never enough by itself, Diane observed. It takes work and choice and showing up even when you don't want to. Your wife made a choice. A selfish one, maybe, but a choice. You've made different choices. Every day you choose your kids, choose to keep going, choose to be present. That matters. Some days I don't feel like I'm choosing. Some days I'm just surviving. Survival is a choice too. You could have given up, could have let the state take the kids, could have fallen apart. You didn't. You kept going. That's heroic, Marcus, even if it doesn't feel like it. They sat in comfortable silence, the kind that only develops between people who have stopped performing for each other. Tell me about your dreams, Marcus said. Before everything fell apart. What did you want? Diane smiled, a wistful expression. I wanted to change lives through music. I know that sounds cheesy, but it's true. I wanted to be the teacher that kids remembered forever, the one who made them believe in themselves, who showed them that music was a language for expressing things words couldn't reach. I wanted to build a program that was so good, so transformative, that it became a model for other schools. You still could. Maybe. Someday. Right now I'm focused on smaller goals. Keep the job. Save money. Build a credit score again. Get my teaching credentials reinstated. Baby steps. But the dream is still there. The dream is still there, Diane confirmed. Bruised and battered, but alive. By the end of her first month, Diane received her first paycheck. She stared at it for a long time before depositing it, overwhelmed by the simple reality of earned money, of legitimate income from legitimate work. After taxes and the small amount she insisted on giving Marcus for rent and groceries, an argument he'd finally conceded after she threatened to look for other housing, she had $800. She opened a savings account, put in $600, used the rest to buy small gifts for the kids, nothing extravagant, just tokens of appreciation. A book on architecture for Emma, who had started expressing interest in her father's work. A new set of colored pencils for Sophie. Building sets for the twins. And for Marcus, a nice travel mug to replace the cracked one he'd been using for years, with World's Best Dad engraved on it. You didn't have to do this, Marcus said, but he was smiling. I wanted to. You've all given me so much. Let me give something back. Halloween came, and Diane threw herself into helping with costumes. She taught Sophie how to sew simple stitches so she could help make her fairy princess dress. She found tutorials online for creating elaborate armor for Jake's night costume. She helped Lily design a mad scientist getup complete with goggles and a lab coat. Emma decided she was too old for trick-or-treating but agreed to dress up as a zombie to hand out candy. Marcus watched Diane work with his children and felt something shifting in his chest, something he'd thought was dead permanently waking up. He tried to ignore it, to tell himself it was just gratitude or friendship or the comfort of having help. But late at night, alone with his thoughts, he had to admit it was more than that. He was falling for her. For the way she hummed while doing dishes. For the patience she showed with Sophie's endless questions. For the way she'd started leaving little notes around the house, reminders about school events, encouragement before a hard day, jokes that made him laugh. For the way she listened when he talked about work frustrations, offering insights that were both practical and compassionate. But Marcus was terrified. What if he misread the situation? What if his feelings were one-sided? What if pursuing anything romantic would ruin the delicate balance they'd achieved? Worse, what if he was just lonely and confusing proximity with genuine connection? So he said nothing, kept his feelings carefully locked away, and focused on maintaining the status quo. Diane, for her part, was navigating her own complicated emotions. She woke every morning grateful for the roof over her head, for meaningful work, for these 4 beautiful children who had accepted her into their lives. And increasingly, for Marcus himself, for his quiet strength, his dedication to his kids, his willingness to help a stranger without expecting anything in return. She caught herself watching him sometimes, the way his brow furrowed when he was concentrating on helping with homework, the way he laughed at his own terrible dad jokes, the way he'd unconsciously reach out to ruffle one of his kids' hair in passing. She caught herself imagining a future that included him, and then immediately felt guilty for those imaginings. She was a charity case living in his home. He'd taken her in out of kindness, nothing more. Developing feelings for him would be a betrayal of his trust, would complicate everything, would potentially ruin the best thing that had happened to her in years. So she, too, said nothing and tried to content herself with friendship. 2 people, both wounded, both healing, both falling, both terrified. And 4 children who saw what the adults refused to acknowledge. Thanksgiving approached with the inevitability of changing seasons. Marcus typically dreaded holidays since Rebecca left. They were reminders of what the family had lost, of the empty chair at the table, of his own inadequacy at creating the kind of magical memories he thought children deserved. But this year felt different. Diane had volunteered to handle the cooking, which lifted an enormous weight from Marcus's shoulders. She planned the menu with the kids' input, turkey, obviously, but also Sophie's requested sweet potato casserole, the twins' favorite stuffing, Emma's choice of cranberry sauce, and Marcus's mother's pumpkin pie recipe that he'd been too emotional to attempt since she died. "We should invite people," Emma suggested one evening. "Dad, what about your coworkers? And Diane, what about Angela? She's been so nice to you." Diane looked uncertain. "I don't want to impose." "It's not imposing if we're inviting," Lily interrupted. "That's the opposite of imposing. That's outposing." "Proposing," Jake corrected. "No, when you propose, you ask someone to marry you," Lily argued. "It can mean suggesting something too," Emma said, ever the voice of reason. "Can we invite people or not?" Marcus considered. His instinct was to refuse. Holidays with just his small unit felt safer, more manageable. But he looked at his children's eager faces and realized they were craving community, connection beyond their immediate family. "Sure," he heard himself say. "Let's invite people." And so Thanksgiving became a production. Marcus invited Robert and his wife Helen, plus Angela and her husband David. Diane tracked down Carlos, the Save Mart night manager who had been kind to her, and shyly invited him. Emma asked if her best friend Madison could come with her parents. The twins wanted their friend Owen from down the street. What Marcus had envisioned as an intimate 6-person meal ballooned into a gathering of nearly 20 people. "We don't have enough chairs," Marcus pointed out the week before. "We'll borrow some," Diane said, undaunted. "This is going to be wonderful." She threw herself into preparations with an intensity that Marcus recognized as someone trying to prove something, to herself, to him, to the universe. She deep-cleaned the house. She planned every dish with the precision of a military operation. She roped the kids into making decorations, construction paper turkeys and handprint leaves and centerpieces made from gourds and candles. The night before Thanksgiving, Marcus found her in the kitchen at midnight, making pie crusts by hand. "You should be sleeping," he said. Couldn't sleep. Too excited. Too nervous. She didn't stop working, her hands moving with practiced efficiency. "Do you know how long it's been since I hosted anything? Since I had a home to host in." Marcus pulled up a chair, watching her work. "You don't have to prove anything, you know. Everyone who's coming, they're coming because they want to see us, not to judge your hosting skills." "I know. Rationally, I know that. But irrationally, I feel like this is my chance to give something back. To show that I'm not just someone who takes. That I can contribute, create, build something meaningful." "You've been doing that every day since you got here." Diane finally stopped, looking at him with flour-dusted hands. "Have I? Or am I just convenient? Free childcare and housekeeping in exchange for room and board." Marcus stood up, moved closer. "Is that really what you think? That you're just convenient, sometimes? When I let myself think too much?" She returned her attention to the pie crust. "I don't want to be a burden, Marcus. I don't want to be your charity project." "You're not. You're..." He struggled to find words that were honest but didn't reveal too much. "You're part of this family now. The kids love you. I'm grateful for you. Every single day. Not because you cook or clean or help with homework, but because you're here. Because you care about us. Because you make this house feel like a home again." Diane's hands stilled. She looked at him with eyes that held questions Marcus wasn't ready to answer. "Marcus." "Let me help you finish these pies," he interrupted, unable to handle wherever this conversation was heading. "Tell me what to do." They worked side by side in comfortable silence, rolling dough and mixing fillings, until the early hours of the morning. By the time they finished, there were 3 pumpkin pies, 2 apple pies, and 1 experimental chocolate pecan pie that Sophie had insisted on. Thanksgiving Day arrived with surprising smoothness. Diane orchestrated the cooking with the efficiency of a conductor leading a symphony. Emma mashed potatoes while FaceTiming with Madison about some school drama. The twins set the table with mismatched chairs borrowed from neighbors. Sophie appointed herself as official greeter, answering the door and taking coats with solemn importance. The house filled with people and noise and laughter. Robert told terrible jokes that made the kids groan. Helen showed Sophie her collection of turkey-shaped pins. Angela and Diane talked about work gossip in the kitchen. Carlos brought his guitar and ended up in the living room teaching Jake some basic chords. Marcus stood in the doorway between the kitchen and dining room, watching this chaotic, beautiful gathering, and felt something he'd thought was lost forever: contentment.
Pure, simple contentment.
When it was time to eat, they squeezed 20 people around a table meant for 8. Plates overlapped, elbows bumped, someone's wine got knocked over, by Robert, who apologized profusely while Helen laughed. But no one cared. The food was excellent, the turkey perfectly moist, the sides all delicious, the rolls warm and buttery. Before eating, Marcus stood up to say something. He wasn't good at speeches, hated being the center of attention, but this moment felt important enough to push past discomfort. "I just wanted to say thank you," he began, his voice rough. "Thank you all for being here, for being part of our lives. This year has been. It's been hard in some ways and surprisingly wonderful in others. We've learned that family isn't always who you're born to. Sometimes it's who shows up, who stays, who chooses to be present even when it's messy or complicated. So thank you for showing up, for staying, for choosing us." He sat down quickly, embarrassed by his own emotion. But around the table, he saw understanding in people's faces. Robert raised his glass in a silent toast. Angela reached over to squeeze Diane's hand. Emma smiled at him with pride in her eyes. They ate and talked for hours. The kids eventually escaped to play games in the living room while the adults lingered over pie and coffee. Diane told stories about her grandmother's cooking, which led to Carlos sharing memories of his abuela in Puerto Rico, which led to Roba. 3 months passed in a blur of ordinary days that somehow felt extraordinary. Christmas came and went in a flurry of homemade decorations and carefully budgeted gifts. Diane had saved enough to contribute significantly to presents for the kids, insisting on paying her fair share despite Marcus's protests. New Year's arrived with a quiet celebration, just the 6 of them, watching the ball drop on TV while the younger kids fell asleep on the couch. As midnight approached, Marcus found himself standing on the back porch with Diane, both wrapped in jackets against the January cold, watching their breath form clouds in the air. "Make a wish," Diane said as the countdown began inside. Marcus closed his eyes. He knew what he wished for, but he was too afraid to speak it aloud. When he opened them, Diane was looking at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. For a moment, he thought she might say something, might acknowledge the thing that had been growing between them for months. But the moment passed. The kids called them inside for sparkling cider and noisemakers, and whatever might have been said remained unspoken. By February, Diane had saved nearly $4,000. She mentioned casually over dinner one night that she'd been looking at apartments, nothing fancy, just studios or one-bedrooms in safe neighborhoods with bus access to work. The announcement landed like a bomb in the middle of the meal. Sophie's fork clattered to her plate. The twins stopped mid-argument. Emma's face went pale, and Marcus felt something crack in his chest. "You're leaving." Sophie's voice was small, frightened. "Not leaving exactly," Diane said quickly, clearly not having anticipated this reaction. I've been here almost 5 months. Your dad has been so generous, but I can't stay forever. I need to rebuild my independence, get my own place. It's time." "But why?" Lily demanded. "Don't you like it here?" "I love it here. You know that. But this was always meant to be temporary. A stepping stone while I got back on my feet. And I am back on my feet now, thanks to your dad and all of you." Marcus should say something. He knew he should. Should tell her she didn't have to go, that she belonged here, that the thought of her leaving made him feel like the ground was crumbling beneath him. But the words stuck in his throat, trapped behind years of fear and walls built to protect his heart from further damage. "If that's what you want," he heard himself say instead, his voice carefully neutral. "We understand." Diane looked at him sharply, and he saw hurt flash across her face before she hid it behind a smile. "It's not about wanting. It's about what's right. What's appropriate." That night, after the kids were in bed, Emma cornered Marcus in his bedroom. She stood in the doorway with her arms crossed, looking more like a disappointed parent than a 12-year-old daughter. "You're really going to let her leave?" Emma demanded. "It's her choice, Em. I can't force her to stay." "Did you ask her to stay? Actually ask her." "She said she wants her own place. I'm not going to." "She said it's appropriate. That's different than wanting." Emma sat on the edge of his bed uninvited. "Dad, I'm 12, and even I can see that you two have feelings for each other. The way you look at each other when you think no one's watching. The way you both light up when the other person walks in the room. The way you make each other laugh. Why are you both being so stubborn?" "It's complicated, Emma." "Why? Because Mom left? Because you're afraid? Because Diane started out needing help and now you're worried it would be weird to date her?" Emma's voice softened. "Dad, Diane isn't Mom. She doesn't run away from hard things. She faces them. And you deserve to be happy. We all do. We've been happier these past months than we've been in 3 years. Don't you want to keep that?" Marcus rubbed his face, exhausted. "What if I tell her how I feel and she doesn't feel the same way? What if it ruins everything and she leaves anyway, but now it's awkward and horrible? What if you don't tell her and she leaves and you never know? What if you let fear win again?" Emma stood up. "I know I'm just a kid, but I also know that Mom leaving taught me something important. Life is short and unpredictable. If you have a chance at happiness, you should take it, even if it's scary, especially if it's scary." She left him sitting there in the dark, wrestling with truths he'd been avoiding for months. The next evening, Marcus came home to find Diane teaching Sophie a song in the living room. Their voices blended perfectly, Diane's trained soprano and Sophie's pure, childish treble creating something achingly beautiful. The twins were doing homework at the kitchen table, and Emma was upstairs, but even she had her door open, listening. Marcus stood in the doorway, listening to them sing, and made a decision. He was tired of fear, tired of protecting himself at the cost of possibility, tired of letting the ghosts of his past dictate his future. When the song ended and Sophie ran off to play, Marcus approached Diane. "Can we talk?" "Outside." They bundled up and walked to the small park 2 blocks away, the same park where Diane had sometimes slept before Marcus found her. They sat on a bench under the streetlights, their breath visible in the cold air. "I don't want you to leave," Marcus said without preamble. "I know I should want you to be independent and have your own space and all of that. And I do want those things for you. I want you to have everything you want. But selfishly, personally, I don't want you to go." Diane was quiet, looking at her hands. "Marcus." "Let me finish. Please." He took a breath. "When Rebecca left, I built walls. I told myself I wouldn't let anyone in again, wouldn't risk that kind of pain. And for 3 years, those walls kept me safe. They also kept me alone and miserable, but I told myself it was worth it. Then you showed up, singing in a grocery store, and somehow you climbed right over those walls without even trying." He turned to face her. "You're brilliant and talented and kind. You make my kids happy. You make my house feel like a home. You make me feel less alone. And somewhere along the way, I fell in love with you. Not because you cook or clean or help with the kids, though all of that is wonderful, but because you're you. Because you're brave and resilient and you sing like you're pulling music directly from the universe. Because you see me as a person and not just a dad or a boss or a provider. Because when I'm with you, I feel like maybe I could be happy again." Diane's eyes filled with tears. "I'm still broken, Marcus. I'm still putting myself back together. I have debt and trauma and—" "We are all broken," Marcus interrupted gently. "We are all putting ourselves back together. That's just being human. The question isn't whether we are broken. It's whether we are willing to do the work of healing together. What if I'm not good at this? At relationships? Daniel left because he made bad choices and couldn't face the consequences. That's on him, not you. You didn't fail at that relationship. He did." Diane wiped her eyes. "I was so afraid," she whispered. "Afraid that my feelings weren't appropriate, that I was just grateful and confusing that with love. Afraid that you only saw me as someone to help, not someone to be with. Afraid that I'd ruin the best thing in my life by wanting more than I deserved." "You deserve everything good, Diane. Everything. And if you don't feel the same way about me, that's okay. I'll respect that. But I needed you to know. I needed to be brave enough to say it out loud." Diane laughed through her tears. "Marcus Chen, I have been in love with you since approximately the 2nd week I was in your house. Maybe earlier. You're kind and patient and funny in ways you don't even realize. You're an amazing father. You helped me when I had nothing to offer in return. You saw me as a person when I'd stopped seeing myself as one. How could I not fall in love with you?" They sat there, 2 wounded people who had found each other in the most unlikely circumstances, both crying and laughing, and for the first time in years, both allowing themselves to hope. Marcus reached for her hand. "So, don't get an apartment? Maybe. Or get one if you need space, but know that you're always welcome in our home. As more than a guest or a helper. As whatever you want to be." "I want to stay," Diane said firmly. "I want to be part of this family. I want to see where this goes. I want to stop being afraid and start being brave." "Me too," Marcus said. They kissed there in the cold park, under the streetlights, 2 blocks from the grocery store where their story had begun. It wasn't fireworks or violins. It was quiet and gentle and tasted like tears and hope. It was a beginning. 18 months later, the auditorium at Jefferson High School was packed. Marcus sat in the front row, flanked by his 4 children. Emma, now 14 and stunning in a dress she'd picked out herself, the twins 10 and squirming with barely contained energy, Sophie 8 and clutching a bouquet of roses she'd insisted on buying with her allowance money. On stage, Diane stood in front of a choir of 50 students, her hands moving with practiced grace as she conducted them through a piece that Marcus didn't recognize but found beautiful. She wore a simple black dress and had her hair pulled back, and she looked radiant, confident, alive. She'd gotten her teaching credentials reinstated 6 months ago after a lengthy appeals process. The school board had reviewed her case, considered her circumstances, and concluded that she deserved a second chance. Henderson High, across town from Jefferson, had hired her to rebuild their struggling music program. In the 18 months since that night in the park, everything had changed and nothing had changed. Diane still lived with them, though now she paid half the mortgage and had officially adopted the kid's last name through a complex legal process that involved family court and character witnesses and mountains of paperwork. They weren't married. Both agreed they wanted to take things slowly, to heal fully before making more permanent commitments. But they were a family. Officially, legally, actually. Emma had gotten the lead in her school musical and discovered a passion for theater. The twins had started a YouTube channel reviewing Lego sets that somehow had 12,000 subscribers. Sophie was learning piano and driving everyone crazy with her practice sessions, but no one had the heart to complain because her joy was infectious. Marcus had gotten a promotion to senior partner at the firm, partly because his work had improved dramatically once he wasn't drowning in exhaustion and stress. He'd even started dating Diane properly, dinner and movies and long walks where they talked about everything. The concert ended to thunderous applause. Diane bowed, gestured to her students, and her face lit up with pride. She'd done this, rebuilt a program from almost nothing, inspired these kids, given them a language for expressing themselves. Backstage afterward, the kids surrounded Diane with their bouquet and congratulations. Sophie launched herself into Diane's arms with such force that they both nearly fell over. The twins presented her with a card they'd made featuring stick figures and the words "You're the best" written in 3 different colors of crayon. Emma, more reserved but no less sincere, hugged Diane tightly and whispered something that made Diane's eyes fill with tears. Marcus hung back, letting his children have their moment. But when Diane's eyes found his over Sophie's head, he smiled. She smiled back, that full, genuine smile that still took his breath away. "You were amazing," he said when he finally got close enough. "They were amazing. I just got out of their way and let them shine." That's leadership. That's what you do. You help people shine. They walked to the van together, this family of 6, piling in with the comfortable chaos of people who knew each other's rhythms. On the drive home, Sophie fell asleep against Diane's shoulder. The twins argued about whether they should get ice cream to celebrate. Emma scrolled through photos from the concert, already posting them to social media. "I'm thinking about writing a song," Diane said quietly to Marcus while they waited at a red light. "About second chances and found families and grocery stores. I'd like to hear that song. I'll dedicate it to a man who was brave enough to invite a stranger to dinner. I'll dedicate my next building design to a woman who was brave enough to say yes." They drove through the familiar streets of their neighborhood, past the Save Mart where it had all started, past the park where they'd confessed their feelings, toward the house that had transformed from a place of survival into a place of joy. That night, after the kids were in bed, Marcus and Diane sat in their usual spots in the living room with tea. But tonight felt different. Tonight felt like an ending and a beginning all at once. "I have something to ask you," Marcus said, his heart hammering. Diane set down her teacup, suddenly serious. "Okay. These past 18 months have been the happiest of my life. You've taught me that it's possible to heal, to love again, to build something beautiful from broken pieces. You've been the best partner I could imagine, patient with my fears, gentle with my wounds, brave enough to push me when I needed pushing. You're an incredible mother to our kids. You make every day brighter just by being in it." He pulled a small box from his pocket, and Diane's hand flew to her mouth. "I know we said we'd take things slow, and we have. But I also know that I want to spend the rest of my life with you. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep next to you every night. I want to build a future together, whatever that looks like. I want to choose you every day, and I want you to choose me. Diane Morrison, will you marry me?" Diane was crying openly now, nodding before she could even speak. "Yes," she finally managed. "Yes, absolutely yes. I choose you, Marcus Chen. I choose this family. I choose this beautiful, messy, imperfect, perfect life we are building together. The ring, a simple band with 3 small stones representing the moment they met, the moment they confessed their love, and the future they would build, slid onto her finger perfectly. They kissed, and somewhere upstairs, Marcus could hear Sophie's door crack open and excited whispers as the kids who were definitely supposed to be asleep celebrated this development. Should we tell them to go back to bed? Diane asked, laughing. In a minute, Marcus said. Let them be excited. Let them celebrate. We've earned this, all of us. We've earned the right to be happy. And so the story that began with a voice in a grocery store, with desperation and loneliness and a moment of unexpected kindness, became a story about healing and love and the families we choose. It became a story about second chances and the courage to stay when everything tells you to run. It became a story about 4 children who gained a mother, a woman who found her voice again, and a man who learned that his heart was bigger and braver than he'd ever imagined. Outside, the world continued its complicated, messy existence. But inside their house, in that moment, there was only love and laughter and the quiet certainty that they had found what everyone searches for, home. Not a place, but a feeling. Not perfection, but acceptance. Not the absence of pain, but the presence of people who would help carry it. They had found each other in the darkness, and together they had created light. And that, after all, is what every story is really about, the ways we save each other, one small act of kindness at a time, until those small acts accumulate into something miraculous called a life. Sometimes the most beautiful music comes from the most broken instruments. Sometimes the strongest families are built from scattered pieces. And sometimes, in a fluorescent-lit grocery store at 9:47 p.m. on an ordinary Tuesday, the universe conspires to bring together exactly the right people at exactly the right time, not to fix each other, but to help each other become whole. Thank you so much for taking your precious time watching. Please, before you leave, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. God bless you.